we're going to get into a little bit of food and water scarcity, environmental conversation, and the waste management. Back in the late 19th, early 20th century, there was a progressive era in the United States between 1897 to 1920, and in between that time there was the golden age of agriculture happening. It was seen as the golden age of agriculture because of how farming was doing really well at the time, and prices for food started to go up in value up until World War I happened and prices for food dropped. However, there was also rapid urbanization and industrialization happening as well. With that being said, a lot of agriculture started shifting from widespread subsistence farming to a system of farms providing food for newly urbanized areas. As urbanization continued to grow, it started to cause problems for farmers, meaning the size of American farmlands started to decrease, as well as the percent of farmers in labor declined by 20% within 4 decades. So farmers started reaching out to Congress and the president for help. A lot of senators at the time, they were not on the west side of the country yet, so with the east, midwest, and certain parts of the south except New Hampshire, those senators represented states located west of the Mississippi River for a period of time. So because of that, they had interest in building infrastructure in the west to encourage rapid settlement. See where we're starting to have a problem? Well, Congress didn't like that idea and wanted to obtain balance for farmers. So they enacted a Reclamation Act to bring needed water to fertile dry lands of the west. This helped with one of the farmers' problems, but they were still concerned about rapid growth. However, in 1907, financial panic swept the U.S., and for farmers, their panic was oversupply, and blamed the president, Theodore Roosevelt at the time, for the reform activities that were going on. So, one of the first things he wanted to handle was conservation. A message was sent to Congress, and it was to have the federal forest reserves transferred from the Department of Interior to the Department of Agriculture, and added additional acres in 1906 to 1907, which more than doubled the initial size of the reserves. In addition to the Weeks Act, which was created to allow more federal government to buy forest lands to protect the flow of water and navigable streams anywhere in the country. Keep that in mind. And of course, other acts were made for Food and Drug Act, Agriculture Appropriations Act, and many other acts were made around this time. Pretty much was for what was currently happening and how they can either balance it out or make it better. Well, a decade after the Progressive Era, the Great Depression hit, which was also when the U.S. started noticing global warming a bit more. And one of the problems was seasonal flooding happening in certain areas of the country. Because of that, the Hoover Dam was built on the Colorado River, and the idea was by the president, Franklin Roosevelt. This helped not only control seasonal flooding from the Colorado River to protect cities and farms, but it also provided irrigation water and hydroelectric power, which made downstream settlement possible for areas like California, Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. Fast forward to today, because of our settlements and our continued growth of urbanization, infrastructure, and industrialization, we started to use more of our resources than what was being regenerated, and this resulted in our current circumstance today of water scarcity, which leads to food scarcity, all while climate change is continuing to happen around us. Overall, agriculture consumes more water than any source and wastes much of it through inefficiencies. This results in food shortages, meat overpopulations, wetlands being drained and dried, unsustainable use because of toxins and chemicals used for the produce, which then the water can't be recycled, and plays a role in climate change, where there are droughts in certain parts of the world while other parts are dealing with floods. If we continue going down this route, what may happen? If we continue going down this route, we may go into a food versus water situation and start to question if we actually need all this food or any of it that we're overproducing, using hundreds and thousands of gallons of water for. we may go into a flood versus drought habitat where we have two different climates, where one lives with water and the other lives completely without water. And depending on where you live, we as humans adapt to those conditions. Or maybe we go into a situation where we completely run out of fresh water, you know, from rivers, from everywhere we usually get our sources of fresh water today. And based off of what scientists found, we'd be desperate enough to collect fresh water that's underneath the ocean surfaces and deal with the consequences later. What they cause earthquakes within the oceans, would that shift our lands and soils of, you know, our very feet below? The options are endless.